Tunnel Rat. Real name, Nicky Lee. He was always my favorite character in the G.I. Joe, a real American hero franchise. Growing up in the 80s, the Explosive Ordnance Disposal, EOD expert, was the pinnacle of the lineup for me. Sure, you had fan favorites like Snake Eyes Duke and Flint, but Tunnel Rat, who specialized in disarming traps in tight, underground spaces, was my pick. He seemed more real than the others, though as a 7-year-old, I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I remember being mesmerized the first time I read his file card on the back of the packaging. File name, Lee, Nicky. Primary military specialty, EOD. Quote, Tunnel Rat believes that anything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. He can shoot straighter, bite harder, and run faster than anything he's ever encountered in a tunnel, so why worry? He was everything I wanted to be. I vividly remember a summer afternoon, playing in the mulch at my parents', landscaping, vowing that one day I would be a soldier. I would grow up to match Tunnel Rat's grit. 14 years passed before I could make that childhood vow a reality. I arrived at Fort Benning in August of 2001, setting my sights on becoming an 11B light infantryman. By then, Tunnel Rat was a distant memory, long forgotten in a crate in my parents' basement. But everything changed a month later. September 11th hit while I was in training, and the world shifted beneath our feet. A 20-year war was beginning, and I was slap dab in the middle of it. I eventually earned my blue cord on the parade grounds, but not without sacrifice. The 6-month extended training took its toll. I lost friends who couldn't rough it, and I physically lost a finger in the process. Of the 15 recruits I traveled down with from MEPS, I was the only one left standing. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel alone. I deployed, watched friends lose limbs and lives, and eventually returned to my parents' house, tougher, worn, and a digit down from 10. I was strong yet fragile, back in a world that had seemingly passed me by. I suppose that's what led me to the basement one night. I needed to find the root of it all, why I had worn sage green as a child, and why I was now a veteran who had dared to do. I dug through dusty bins under the stairs until I found my father's old footlocker. I undid the rusty snaps. There in the center lay my beloved Joe's. With Tunnel Rat taking center stage. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe answers to the life I had led, or just a tangible 4-inch piece of plastic that had secretly guided my path. Tunnel Rat now sits on my computer desk. Late at night, I find myself staring at the figure's tiger camo face, thinking about what I eventually learned, that he wasn't just a corporate invention. He was based on a real man named Larry H.I.S.S, a combat engineer in Vietnam who poured his own reality into the plastic. It makes me wonder as I look at him now. He was molded from the memories of an old war, and I was molded by the fires of a new one. We are both products of the same machine, shaped by hands that knew the weight of a rifle. And as I sit here, a little broken but still standing, I ask myself, does the soldier make the toy, or does the toy make the soldier? The more I stared at that 4-inch figure, the more the name Larry Hama began to weigh on me. I fell down a rabbit hole, lit by the glow of my computer screen at 2:00 a.m., searching for the architect of my childhood obsession. I discovered that Hama wasn't just some executive in a suit. He was a veteran, a combat engineer, who had humped through the jungles of Vietnam long before I was even a thought. Suddenly, the realness I couldn't identify at 7 years old made perfect sense. Every line of that dossier, the way Tunnel Rat carried himself, his specialized EOD gear, even his Brooklyn grit, it wasn't just flavor text. It was a transfer of energy. Hama had taken his own trauma, his own specialized knowledge of explosives and dark, claustrophobic tunnels, and distilled it into a toy. I looked at my own hand, the missing digit, the scar tissue from the Georgia heat and the desert sun, and then back at the figure. I realized Hama hadn't just been selling toys. He was a creator who had been molded by his own war, just as I had been molded by mine. There was a strange, silent brotherhood in that realization. Across decades, one soldier had reached out through a piece of plastic. I wondered if Hama knew, when he was sketching out Tunnel Rat's tiger camo, that he was drafting the blueprint for my life. The deeper I dug into Hama's history, the more the lines blurred. He was an artist, a writer, and a soldier. He took the chaos of the jungle and turned it into something a child could hold. Now, holding that same figure as a man, I found myself standing at a new crossroads. I had followed the blueprint to the letter. I had made the vow, survived the training, and seen the war. But as I looked at Tunnel Rat, I realized the story wasn't over. Hama didn't just stay a soldier, he became a creator. He took the grit and turned it into something that lasted. I picked up the figure, the plastic cool against my skin. I wasn't just a veteran looking at a toy anymore. I was a man looking at a legacy. And for the first time since I returned home, I didn't feel like a finished product of a 20-year war. I felt like a rough sketch waiting for the next line to be drawn. The more I unearthed about Larry Hama's service, the more that small plastic figure on my desk seems to exhale a heavy, hidden history. I wasn't looking at a toy anymore. I was staring into a 4-inch homage to a lineage of ghosts. In 1969, Larry Hama was a young man from New York, a living, breathing mirror to the fictional Nicky Lee. While the Big Army moved in thunderous maneuvers above, Hama was assigned to the 18th Engineer Brigade in Vietnam. He lived in the dirt, obsessed with the infrastructure of death, the deadly secrets buried beneath the topsoil. He was a combat engineer, the one summoned when the world became a labyrinth of pressure plates and hidden trapdoors. Tunnel Rat was never a rank. It was a quiet vow taken by the brave and the claustrophobic. They descended into the Cu Chi tunnels, veins of darkness carved into the earth by the North Vietnamese. It was a war fought in whispers and heartbeats. The reality was a far cry from the vibrant colors of a Saturday morning cartoon. And like the figure on my desk, the real Tunnel Rats carried a minimalist's kit for the afterlife. A .45 caliber pistol, a flashlight, and a knife. Anything more was a burial shroud in those oxygen-deprived passages. In the stifling silence of the earth, they navigated a gauntlet of bouncing Bettys. Pungy stakes, and venomous snakes suspended from the ceiling. Living traps designed to drop like a nightmare onto a soldier's head. To survive that hole, you had to believe you were the apex predator in the dark. You had to bite harder, run faster, and breathe shallower. Hesitation was just another word for never coming back up for air. When Hama returned to the world, he didn't leave the war behind. He translated it. He didn't write about saving the world in abstract heroics. He wrote about primary military specialties. He wrote the cold, technical poetry of the M16 and the Claymore mine. He breathed his Brooklyn mean streets, upbringing into Tunnel Rat, gifting him that defiant mantra, anything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It was a philosophy forged in the humid rot of the 18th Engineers, eventually passed down to me through the cellophane window of a toy store. The irony hits me now with the weight of an entrenching tool. Hama used his grit to survive the jungle, then spent 40 years molding that trauma into a bridge. 4-inch soldiers of a war long past, but never truly over for those left and those who returned. He used art to cauterize the wounds of war, to cauterize the intangible and things that never go. I looked to my own hands. I too had walked a path of the and tasted that same bitter isolation and regret. The hollow silence of being the one left standing while the world moves on, oblivious. I see now that Tunnel Rat was never just a toy. He was a handoff. Hama cleared the tunnels of the 70s so that he could eventually choose to create rather than destroy. Now, with a 20-year war at my back and a finger missing from my hand, the scales have fallen from my eyes. Hama didn't just design a figure, he engineered a legacy of resilience. He proved that you can descend into the darkest, tightest spaces life offers, losing literal pieces of yourself in the shadows, and still emerge into the light with the power to build something that matters. My story was never just about becoming a soldier. It was about discovering what remains of a man once he finally crawls out of the tunnel. And so I must ask once again, does the soldier make the toy, or does the toy make the soldier?